Hello, I'm Arslan Winoff and we are Team 8353 and our project is over carbon emissions by air travel. So I would like to begin by discussing our mission. So take a second and think about how life would be without planes. If I wanted to travel from here to California, it would take 3 days to drive all the way there, spend a day or whatever, and then drive all the way 3 days again to come back. So as helpful and efficient as planes are, we often overlook their effects on the environment. My team and I have come together to bring awareness to this issue and to combat these effects. So we're working with two clients, one of which is Dr. Kim Cobb from the EAS department, which is the Earth and Atmospheric Sciences department at Georgia Tech. Dr. Cobb is the director of the Global Change program at Tech, and she employs several other junior design teams. The Global Change program has a goal to grow educational and research activities at the intersection of global change, climate change, and energy. We are also working with Mr. Lilith Palpetti, and he is our primary person to go to for our project. He has helped us with which route to take in terms of our project, what designs to use, as well as the tech stack we use and many other essentials for our project. He is a grad student at Georgia Tech and works with Dr. Cobb. So, as mentioned earlier, our project is one of many related to helping save the environment from unintended side effects, which overall aims to reach Georgia Tech's carbon neutrality goal.
Speaking of carbon neutrality, we need to first define what carbon neutrality is. Carbon neutrality means reducing your carbon emissions effectively to zero. This doesn't necessarily mean getting rid of all emissions, it just means reducing as much as possible and then offsetting the rest. There are three basic steps to going carbon neutral. First of all, you need to measure how much carbon emissions you have. Afterwards, you need to reduce them as much as possible. And then lastly, offset whatever remains. So we cannot get rid of all carbon emissions, but we can at least offset them by planting trees, cleaning up the oceans, going green with energy, all that stuff. So our project aims to enter this equation in the first stage, which is measuring carbon emissions. What we want to do is help Georgia Tech and other organizations in the future measure their carbon emissions due to flight more accurately. So you might be asking, why flight? What's so special about flight that we should, put this much effort into it? So, yeah. When I say, travel and pollution and, carbon emissions, you're probably thinking about something like this, which is, a big truck rolling coal, being big in deep south or something. And obviously, it is a pretty dirty, inefficient machine. But you're probably not thinking about this nice, sleek, quiet plane up in the sky, along the clouds, flying serenely. And you're definitely not thinking about this room full of somewhat balding men sitting around looking at the stage where people seem to be doing shots. I don't know. So this is a picture from DEF CON 26. It happened in Vegas. DEF CON, in fact, happens every year in Vegas, and lots of people fly in to, take part in it. Now, you might be asking why I'm showing this picture, and pick three people from this picture, and look at them. Those three people contributed more to global carbon emissions just by flying into and out of DEF CON than that truck did in an entire year. So what that means is, and before, I should mention that there are about 28,000 people attending DEF CON this year. So if we took DEF CON off the face of the earth and replaced it with 5,000 or more coal rolling trucks, that would still be better for Earth. Now that's crazy. That we should clearly do something about air travel and its carbon footprint. But if it's such an important thing, why aren't we already doing stuff about it? What's so difficult about it? So the problem is, at least at Georgia Tech, it is not easy to get this data and it is not easy to quantify the impact of air travel. First of all, there is just no central authority through which Georgia Tech students and professors buy airline tickets. departments handle their own ticket purchases, and in addition, researchers and students can buy tickets on their own and then report it as an expense. So it is rather hard to get this data. And even if we had the data somehow, it is not easy to quantify the carbon impact of these tickets. So case in point, here you see one of the myriad of online free flight carbon footprint calculators. And at first glance, it seems pretty simple. You have your destination, you have where you're flying out from, and whether you're a business or something. And then you just click a button, and it gives you this nice number about how much carbon dioxide your flying cost. Even though it seems nice at first glance, and it is nice, like if I want to just look at my flight data and want to feel bad about going somewhere, this is perfectly usable. But if Georgia Tech wanted to use this for hundreds of flights every year, we would see a lot of problems. First of all, obviously there's no way to just bulk import data into this. So someone would have to sit down and go through hundreds of flights, put them in, and add up the totals. Now obviously that's a very error-prone and just very difficult approach, and it's unlikely that Georgia Tech or any institution would go for it. In addition, you can see that we don't give this any information about when we took the flight, what airline it was, what sort of fuel it was using, etc. So it's missing a lot of data to calculate with. For instance, maybe some airlines do their own offsetting, so we don't have to worry about it. Maybe we should prefer them. There's no way to represent that in the system. In addition, you can see that all we get out of this is just a number. It says 2.28 metric tons. That's nice, but I don't know that I trust that. We can't expect Georgia Tech to trust this single number derived with, obviously missing data, and just with no justification as to how it was reached. For Georgia Tech to take action, we need to provide it with an easy way to get a lot of data, and we need to show how we did our calculations so that experts can verify it independently. To that end, we are proposing a new solution using CO2 at Georgia Tech.
All right, so as we mentioned, our project was based around educating the Georgia Tech community about its carbon emission output via flight, as well as how to reduce that particular set of emissions. So as Ozzy so kindly started to say, we have a site which is called co2.gatech.edu, which would be entered through your Georgia Tech credentials. And then any user who could access the site that way would be able to view information about each department's emissions output. So this is our initial prototype. It's pretty simple. We just have basically the functionality of entering the site, and then you have a drop-down menu which shows each different college, and from there you can view data, which right now is just pretty graphs to try to figure out which format of information would be better for the user, and then you would be able to log out of the system. After some feedback from our professors, we realized that having such simple graphs wasn't super helpful. Adding something a little more complicated and also more visually appealing would be better. In addition to adding carbon emissions in large font at the top, since the last design didn't necessarily give the user a very clear idea of what it was for. And lastly, after multiple discussions with our client, we ended up with something that looks a little bit more like this, where there are different categories in pretty little boxes for the user to view. And from there, I will show you guys the demo.
Alright, so as you can see, our categories are displayed here as shown in the last iteration of our design as discussed with our client. Underneath there is an About This Chart section where we'll eventually have more information, but now goes to a Google page. We still have the drop-down functionality, and we added some date functionality for the search. We also now have an About section to discuss our mission, and a section for feedback.
Okay, so obviously this prototype is still pretty low fidelity. We had a bit of a problem misunderstanding our scope. Initially we had some elements in our design that were unnecessary, that were a little more toward a project that would not be able to be completed in the time frame and was also not entirely what our client was looking for. So in changing the design, it was really difficult to conduct user research as well. And in addition, we had a lack of data to display. Georgia Tech, the way that they conduct CO2 emissions research, they don't actually collect the information that we need to be displaying in a way that's convenient for us to show. They don't collect it per department, so that's something that we're going to have to tackle, as well as accessing the Georgia Tech login API, which is why that wasn't implemented in our design either. However, moving forward, our team is very optimistic about the future of our project. We have talked to the Department of Sustainability, who seems incredibly excited about this project and really wants to move forward and expand it even more so past air travel, which was really exciting. And more than that, we now own the domain for co2.gatech.edu, which means that we have a more concrete platform with which to springboard the rest of our idea. And that's our application. Are there any questions?